This is the last photograph anyone took of the Endurance. For 10 months, the ice had held her like a fist. Now, slowly, that fist began to close. 28 men stood on the ice and listened to their ship die. Their leader stood apart, silent, hands buried in his pockets. Timbers groaned like a wounded animal for hours. Then, in one long shudder, she went under. No radio had reached this place, and none ever would. They were 900 miles from another living soul. Shackleton turned to his men and said only one thing. "Ship and stores have gone, so now we'll go home." No one on Earth believed that promise was possible. He had come within 97 miles of the South Pole once. Then Amundsen reached it, and there was nothing left to claim. So Shackleton chose the one prize still unclaimed, crossing the continent. He advertised for men willing to risk everything for it. Thousands applied, for wages, for glory, for reasons of their own. He picked 28 men, and a ship he renamed Endurance. The name came from his own family motto, "By endurance we conquer." In August 1914, they sailed as the whole world went to war. Shackleton offered his ship and crew to the war effort first. The Admiralty sent back one word: proceed. So they sailed on, unaware how long they would be gone. In South Georgia, whalers warned them the ice was the worst in memory. Shackleton weighed the warning and chose to sail anyway. It was the most consequential decision of his life. 3 days later, they met the ice, and it never let go. For 6 weeks, they picked a path through shifting white mazes. Frank Worsley, the ship's captain, climbed the mast each day, searching for open water. On January 19th, the wind shifted and the ice sealed shut. The Endurance was frozen fast, one day's sail from her goal. Shackleton climbed the mast himself and understood immediately. There would be no landing this year, only survival. He wrote in his diary one word: patience, and underlined it. The ship began to drift wherever the pack ice carried her. Winter fell, and the sun vanished for 4 straight months. Temperatures dropped low enough to freeze breath into ice. Shackleton kept every man busy because idle minds broke first. He gave up his own warm cabin for a sick crewman. On the ice, they built kennels and raced the sled dogs for sport. They played football on the frozen sea in the dead of winter. Shackleton studied each man's mood the way a captain reads weather. He moved the anxious ones near him and the calm ones near them. Not one man was left alone with his fear for long. For a birthday, the cook produced a cake from almost nothing. Midwinter's Day, they held a full feast and sang until midnight. Beneath the ship, currents pulled the ice north toward danger. By spring, the ice around them had begun to grind and crack. The pressure of a whole frozen ocean was slowly closing in. Shackleton ordered the lifeboats, and supplies moved onto the deck. He was already planning for a ship he might soon lose. On October 27th, the ice attacked from 3 sides at once. The hull began to buckle, and water poured through the seams. Shackleton gave the order every man had been dreading: abandon ship and carry only what you could drag on foot. They pitched tents on the ice within sight of the dying ship. For 3 more weeks, the wreck refused to fully sink. Shackleton allowed himself to watch her only once a day. On November 21st, the ice finally let her go under. Shackleton wrote in his diary, "She's gone, boys," and closed the book. 28 men now stood on a floating slab of ice, alone. They named their new home Ocean Camp, half joke, half prayer. Seals and penguins became their only reliable food source. They burned seal blubber for heat when the coal ran out. Shackleton made the hardest call of the whole voyage next. The dogs could not be fed and could not be saved. He ordered them shot, and grieved men carried it out. For weeks afterward, no one spoke of it at all. The ice beneath them kept drifting north day after day. They moved camp again when their floe began to crack apart. They called this one patience camp, and patience nearly broke them. Rations shrank until every man dreamed only of food. Shackleton never let his own doubt reach his men's faces. Privately, he confided that the strain was almost unbearable. By April, the ice floe beneath them had thinned to danger. One night, a crack split straight through a sleeping tent. Shackleton pulled a drowning man out with his bare hands. There was no more solid ice left to stand on safely. It was time to trust their lives to 3 small boats. On April 9th, they launched into the open Southern Ocean. Waves the size of houses tossed the tiny boats for days. Men rowed until their hands froze around the oars. Shackleton stayed awake through every night to watch for danger. Thirst became worse than the cold, worse than the fear. On the 5th day, a dark shape rose from the horizon. It was Elephant Island, their first solid ground in months. Some men could no longer stand once they reached the beach. One sailor simply knelt and ran the pebble through his fingers. It had been 497 days since land. But Elephant Island lay far from any shipping route. No rescue would ever find them there by chance. Shackleton understood that he alone had to go for help. The nearest help lay 800 miles across brutal seas. It was, by any sailor's judgment, an almost impossible voyage. He chose 5 men and the sturdiest of the 3 boats. The carpenter raised its sides and decked it over with canvas. 22 men would stay behind under Frank Wild's command. Shackleton told Wild plainly, "If I don't return, do your best." On April 24th, Shackleton, Worsley, and 4 more launched into the worst ocean on Earth. Worsley would have to navigate by sun alone, if it appeared. For 16 days, the sea tried to kill them every hour. Ice built up on the boat until it nearly capsized them. One night, Shackleton saw a strange clear line on the horizon. He shouted a warning half a second before it hit. It was not clear sky. It was the crest of a rogue wave. The wave nearly swamped and sank them in one violent instant. They bailed for their lives until dawn without stopping once. Fresh water ran out, and thirst became agony. On the 15th day, Worsley finally sighted land. It was South Georgia, but on the wrong, uninhabited side. A hurricane forced them back out to sea for one more night. At last they landed in a narrow, freezing cove. Every man aboard had survived the worst boat journey in history. But the only whaling station lay on the far side of the island. No one had ever crossed that interior, not once, ever. 3 of the 6 were too weak to walk another mile. Shackleton chose Worsley and Crean and left the rest sheltering. They had no rope, no map, and only a carpenter's tool as an ice axe. They screwed boot nails through their soles for grip on ice. For 36 hours straight, Shackleton, Worsley, and Crean climbed without resting once. At the top of one ridge, fog swallowed them completely. With night falling and no shelter, Shackleton made a desperate choice. They coiled their rope into a sled and slid down blind. They dropped 1,000 feet in minutes and survived it. Near dawn, they heard a sound none of them dared believe. It was a factory whistle, calling whalers to their morning shift. It was the first sound of other humans in over a year. Ragged and unrecognizable, they walked into Stromness Station. A young boy took one look and ran away screaming. The station manager did not recognize the man before him. Shackleton simply said, "Don't you know me? I'm Shackleton." The manager wept openly at what he was hearing. Shackleton's first words were not about himself at all. He begged for a ship to reach his men on Elephant Island. The pack ice turned back the first rescue ship completely. A second attempt failed for the very same reason. Each failure meant more months for the men left behind. Under those 2 upturned boats, Frank Wild kept order and hope. Every single morning, he rolled up his sleeping bag and said, "Get ready." "The boss is coming today," he told them, morning after morning. On the fourth attempt, Shackleton borrowed a small Chilean tug. This time, a rare gap opened in the ice at last. Shackleton scanned the shoreline through binoculars, terrified of what he'd find. Then he counted the figures rising from the beach below. All 22 men were alive, and everyone was standing. Not one man of the entire expedition had died. In an age when polar expeditions often buried their dead, that was extraordinary. Shackleton came home a hero to a world consumed by war. Many of his own men went straight from the ice to the trenches. Ordinary life afterward never fit him quite right again. He tried lecture tours, business schemes, and none of them held him. By 1921, he was planning a return to the ice again. Friends worried privately that his health could not survive it. He sailed anyway, aboard a small ship called the Quest. They reached South Georgia, the island that had once saved him. That same night, in his cabin, his heart simply stopped. He died within sight of the mountains he had once crossed on foot. His wife made one request: bury him where he died. They laid him to rest in a small graveyard in South Georgia. The man who saved 27 other lives never truly left the ice. For over a century, the Endurance lay lost beneath the Weddell Sea. In 2022, a team of scientists set out to find her. They used the exact position her captain had calculated in 1915. A robotic submersible was lowered nearly 2 miles into darkness. On March 5th, its cameras found something impossible. The Endurance sat upright on the seabed, almost perfectly intact. Her name was still clearly readable across the stern. The cold and a lack of wood-eating creatures had preserved her perfectly. She was found almost exactly where her navigator had calculated. The discovery happened exactly 100 years after his burial. On the same island, in the same small graveyard, he still rests. His stone carries a line from a poem he loved about ambition. It says he believed a man should strive for his life's true prize. He never crossed Antarctica, the goal that started all, but he brought every single one of his men home alive. And in the end, that was the greater expedition.